so that with vote to host this session to not only familiarize with the Public Service Commission and its processes, but to give you a chance and an opportunity to have a open and candid conversation with your commissioner about any questions or concerns that you might have. That being said, our commissioner here is Mr. Devontae Lewis. He is from Lake Charles, and he has a background in he has a background in social advocacy, and he's been a civil justice person for his entire life. Without further ado, I'm going to bring up the man of the hour. We're going to go over we're going to go over his campaign, some progressions along with that campaign, any wins, losses, that type of thing, and then give you all a chance and an opportunity to ask your questions or express any concerns that you might have. Thank you for being here with us, and here's the Monte.
I like to walk around. Well, good morning, and thank you for attending today. As Hakima said, my name is Devontae Lewis. I proudly serve on the Louisiana Public Service Commission. I represent the 3rd District of Louisiana, which starts right here and has half of East Baton Rouge Parish, creeps over, takes the riverside of West Baton Rouge and a good chunk of Iberville Parish, and then follows the Mississippi River on down in St. James, St. Charles, St. John, Jefferson, and concludes with the vast majority of the city of New Orleans. I'm going to give a brief history because most people don't know what the Public Service Commission is. So the Public Service Commission, we are typically what you call utility regulators. We regulate water, gas, wastewater, sewage, pipelines, telecommunications, home movers, waste haulers, taxi cabs, non-consensual tows, have all been under the purview. So the commission really became the commission in 1921, and it transitioned from what was traditionally called the Railroad Commission, which is where Huey Long got his start, which was managing the interstate railroad system. And so then they merged it in to put in public utilities once they started building the utility infrastructure in the early 1900s. Louisiana is in a very unique place because only 10 states across the country actually get to elect their commissioner. The vast majority of other states in this country appoint their commissioner. So our friends in Arizona, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, here in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia are the 10 states where your utility regulator is directly in your hands. And so I say all that to say this job, of course, is very important, but it's also very hidden. Most of the time, you didn't know about a public service commissioner. You didn't hear him. It's a quiet agency for a reason. And so when you think about everything that you do in life, you think about the lights that are on right now, the AC that is running, the power that's coming in this church, that's all at our discretion of how much they can charge you, what services they have to offer you, and how things operate. But we also, at the commission, thanks to the legislature, we do regulate the rates of calls for incarcerated individuals in prisons and jails in the state of Louisiana. So while the FCC, the federal, and we'll get into that in a second, federal government has some jurisdiction, we can go under and do more, and we've seen that. So I'm just going to briefly say what we've done, what we're doing, and what we can do at the commission. So many people are talking right now about their high energy bill. They're looking, they're saying, I don't know what's going on. And this is why the commissions are so important, because oftentimes people are saying, wait a minute, why is my bill going up? Why is my bill going up? Why is my bill going up? And I tell people there's a lot of education that the utility hasn't given us to make sure that you understand. So you know how sometimes you say, look, I turned everything off in my house when I was gone for work. I turned the AC up, and when I came home, I used it for 2 hours, and my bill still went up. But what they don't tell you is that most of the way we produce our energy in this state is what we call a commodity that's volatile, which means the price changes at a given whim of how much is demanded or the time of day. And so what a lot of people don't know is that 2 hours that you may have come home at 5 o'clock, and you start your dishwasher and you're washing your clothes and you're cooking and you have every light on in the house, you got to remember, everybody else is doing that very same thing. So while you may have been gone all day, the 2 hours that you used all your electricity is now at the highest point of what it cost, because now everybody needs it. So that means every kilowatt hour, which is when you look at your bill, may go from $20 at 8 o'clock to $75 at 5 o'clock, and that's the 2 hours you decided to use all your electricity. And so what we're really trying to push is giving that education so you know what is called time of use. So you know that, hey, it makes sense not to do this. So here's how you play it. You may say, like, I may turn my AC up. If you get a smart thermostat, turn your AC up at 2 o'clock, lower it, bring it back up at 5 o'clock so you're paying a lower rate, but now your house is cool. So now you've saved money and you've kept convenience. But you see, the utility just typically tells you what? Turn your AC to 78. They don't give you all the other information. So we're really trying to push that. One of the other things that we know why energy costs so much in this state is we have what we call an energy burden in Louisiana. And what that means is where you pay more in your income. The typical energy burden, which is what you should take of all your salary and pay to your utility bills in the country, should be around 6%. 6% of what you bring in should go to your utility bills. In Louisiana, all citizens are paying somewhere between 25 and 30% of all the money they make goes towards the utility bill. And so when you think about that, you say, what's the matter? What's wrong? Well, one of the things that we are doing at the commission, and I'm so proud that we were able to do, and we're the first in the South, is we're creating a statewide energy efficiency program. And what that means is oftentimes your energy bill is so high because of what we call efficiencies or weatherization. And that means, let's say you have a house that's not insulated correctly. The windows have cracks. The doors are letting airs out. Where I go and I come visit some people's homes, and they're like, look, I don't understand. I'm trying everything I can, and then I put my hand under their house, and you can just feel the cold air because the floors aren't good. And so what's happening is we don't recognize how much energy we are consuming because we don't have efficiencies, because we don't have good windows, we don't have good insulation, we don't have a high-running HVAC, or we don't have a good stove, that 2 hours is now wasting twice, triple the time of energy that you need. So it's like, even though you're using less, you're using more because the time you use it's draining. I mean, you just think of, I remember the story of a woman who called our office, couldn't figure out why her bill was so high. We did everything. I said, okay, let's do an energy efficiency audit. We went, we had the utility company look. What happened is the back window was gone. So every time she was cooling her house, that air just was pulling outside, which means it takes more air to not get your house to, let's say, 69 degrees if it's also trying to cool outside. And so what we did, the first state in the South, is we are creating a statewide energy efficiency program where you can then call and apply and get funds to redo your roof, to redo your windows, to redo your doors, to look at installation, to change your light bulbs. A lot of people don't know this. I know when we go in the store and we think about them LED lights and we see them and we're like, why would I pay $10 for this one light bulb when I got these fluorescent light bulbs for $2? Well, I tell people all the time, lighting is also one of the challenges. That LED light bulb saves you 3 times your energy cost of a fluorescent light. So yes, you may be making a little bit of a stronger investment on buying an LED light, but you got the savings that you get from when that light is on is so much better because you're not using as much energy to have your house lit up. So I always tell people, invest in those LED lights. Yes, they're a little bit more costly, but they're going to save you on your energy bill, and they have a longer use of life. So when that program rolls out, we're going to be in the community making sure everybody knows that. We're also going to see an influx of federal dollars that are coming from the federal government for home energy rebates. So what it's going to do is it's going to say, hey, look, you don't have a good running stove, or your refrigerator is not energy efficient, or your washer and dryer. I think a lot of people don't know this. One of your biggest drains of your energy is your appliances because they're not efficient, which means if you have one of those refrigerators that was made 15 years ago, it is using so much power to keep your food cold. And so that's why you're sitting there saying, what, I turned off all the lights, I did everything, but your refrigerator's still plugged in. So to keep your freezer going, it's draining all that power. And like I said, when the price is fluctuating because we're using so much gas, and I think that's what people don't know. This is why renewable energy, which I'm going to talk about in a second, is so important, because gas is what we call a volatile commodity. The price changes with it. And guess what? I'll tell you the honest truth. The utility company makes no money off of that. It's a strict pass-through. So if gas costs them $10 for every kilowatt hour you produce, your bill's going to say $10. If gas says 2, your bill's going to say 2. But the challenge that means you can't have any control over that. Like, I had a woman call the office and said, look, my bill said I used 500 kilowatt hours last month, and I used 500 kilowatts this month. Why is my bill different? Well, it's that fuel, because gas was cheaper last month than it was this month. So because we are using so much natural gas, means you don't have the power to control how much your bill goes up and down, because you could be doing less but paying more, because as we know, gas went up when the war in Russia started. Gas went up when the war in Ukraine started. Gas went up when we had the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. So there is nothing you can do now to control your bill when we are using a fuel source that just moves with the market. The beauty of renewable energy or solar is you get that price locked in. So if we are utilizing your house by solar energy, and we say it's going to cost $32 for every kilowatt hour, that's locked in. Well, gas may be 32 today, 15 tomorrow, 85 the next day. And so we are really looking at ways to protect people, one, by what we call gas hedging, which would mean we would force the utility company to say, you know what, no longer can you just pass through your fuel costs. You have to hedge for the year. And you have to utilize your data and all the resources you have and say, you know what, we're gonna hedge that gas is gonna be $35. Which means then your fuel, when you look at your bill, when you go home, look at it, there's a thing called the fuel adjustment clause. And if you pay attention to that, you're going to see it just jumps around because it's following gas. And so those are some of the things that we're working on. I will tell you, everyone wants to know about how do we keep the power on, right? How do we keep the power on in the storms? So the commission, we're working on some rules to require the utilities to make their system more resilient. You see all these wooden poles, they're not the best standard. We need them to invest in steel poles. We need to talk more about burying those power lines underground. Now, I hedge on saying fully bury those power lines underground, because one thing that we do know is it's a little bit more costly to do, but the challenge is when it does fail, it's more costly to fix. Because you got to think about it. So this is why I caution people, burying lines underground isn't the full best thing, because let's say something happens and we didn't bury the line underground, we got to dig up the whole sidewalk. Pull that line back up, replace that line, fix the sidewalk. And so we have to be smart with where we bury our line, because some places it won't make sense, especially places that are known to flooding and other items. And so we are looking at the commission at how we do some of that. What does that look like? What investments does Entergy and DIMCO need to be making here in the city? What does the water company need to be making, right? We know water, I remind people, we don't talk enough about water utility. Because water, I say, is the most important thing that we have, because water is the only utility that you put on you and in you. And if we don't regulate that correctly, right? I mean, let's be clear. We don't see the electrons flowing right here that's running the power, right? We don't see the electrons going in the water. But you know, when you turn that tub on and that sink, if that water comes out brown and green, something ain't right. If you see that, if you hear that smell, something ain't right. Are you gonna grab a glass of water that has a stink to it and is green and brown? And so one of the things I've been pushing is we have to do better at water. We know we have a lot of water treatment plants that are not good. We have overflows that are going into ditches. And so we are looking at how do we revitalize our water infrastructure, because like we know, while Baton Rouge is doing good from the aquifer right now, we don't know how much longer that aquifer is going to be here, because we don't know how much water Exxon is taking from our good drinking water here in Baton Rouge, which means we have to prepare. And the challenge with that is you can't transport water the way you do electricity, right? I can build a line from here to Texas and have that power just flow straight through that line. Think about how hard it is if I needed to move 15 gallons of water to be able to then have drinking water. So that's why I keep raising, we got to talk about water more, because when we lose that, it is not easy to fix. You can't just build a transmission line. You can't just build a water tunnel and say, okay, I'm gonna go get some water from Niagara Falls. Even if you put it on a bus or a train, we all know how heavy it is grabbing a gallon of water. Imagine 16 tons of water, which we may use a day. And so the commission's looking at that. Lastly, I would say what the commission really has the ability to do and what we haven't done well is have public input. The reason why people don't know we exist is because we don't want people to know we exist. We operate very quietly. We don't have town halls like this. We're not engaging. And so I encourage people, this is the time. When you see a question, call your commissioner. Call them to the Public Service Commission. I am personally working on ways to improve this, making sure that people know, because right now you want to know how you can find out that the utility is asking for a rate case? We use the old model, where you got to put a little notice in the paper. You've all gone to the paper and you've seen where's all them little squares, and then right there, maybe in 8 font, it says Entergy is asking for a $10 rate increase before the Public Service Commission. Here's the information to find out more. Now we know in the 21st century, that's not the way we should be communicating with people, that a utility is asking for a rate case. So one of the rules we're working on is I'm going to require, if a utility is asking for a rate case, they have to do public town halls within their jurisdiction, letting the people know what they're proposing before the commission, why they're proposing it, and then we have to include the public's thoughts into our record. And what do I mean by that? When you think about the commission, you think about my job, I am technically not a legislator. I don't make rules. I'm more of a judge. So what happens is a utility says, hey, I want to raise your rates. They file their information. They file people's sworn affidavits. They take direct testimony. I then open it up for intervention. So that means anybody and their mama can come and file to be an intervener in the case. And then they get to ask the company questions, and we get to collect data. Then there are briefs filed. There are hearing briefs by our commission staff. Opposing people can file briefs, and the company files briefs. If we don't come to an agreement, then we go to a trial where the administrative law judge gets to hear everybody's side and then says, okay, I heard the community, I heard the utility, I heard the staff. I'm going to say the rate increase can be $12. And in that case, that recommendation then comes to the commissioners, and we can say, I accept the ALJ's recommendation, I change it, or whatnot. But what I told you that process is because that sounds very much like the criminal and civil court cases, right? And that's why this process is so hard to get involved in, because if you've had to deal with criminal justice or civil litigation, you know it's complex. It's complicated. How do you get to say what you want to do? And so we are working to try to ease that. Because I said it's hard to get community involved when you have to file testimony into the record. We should be collecting your testimony and using it, but in these public town halls. And so what you're going to see from the commission is some work on that. And just some of the last initiatives that I'm working on is we're really going to get politics out of your utility bills. We just had our rule finalized and submitted into the record that I started, which says when you see those commercials, when you see those campaign donations from Entergy, when you see all the community service that they do to get politicians to vote in their favor, that should not be in your utility bill. And so what we are really working on, and we're going to vote probably in December, is to make sure that every dime that you pay Entergy is not a dime they get to use on political spending. Because why should they collect money from us and then spend money to come after us? Doesn't make sense. So we're really working on that. We're saying time's out for that. We got to do something different. And the last thing I'll do, and then I'll take your questions, is we're really looking at what we call choice. A lot of people ask me, well, why can't I choose who my utility provider is? Why can't I can pick myself, I can go pick between AT&T and Cox and Verizon for my cell phone. I get to pick between all these people for internet. I get to decide if I want to go to Walmart or Target. I get to decide if I want to go to Rouse's or Mathern's. Why can't I do that with my electricity? And I'll tell you, it's a complicated question. And we're going to look at it because there's value, right? You want that competition, and sometimes it makes sense. The other flip side is that we do lose some regulation. So right now, when you have that competition, you lose the right to then be able to regulate everything of that utility the way that we do. And I've told that to people, it's a trade-off. So while you may have some choices, you may also lose some choices. So what we've seen, and why I'm being very cautious about this, is what they do to particularly poor black and brown people. We see this in Pennsylvania, we see this in Maryland, we see this in Texas, where you have all these people come and say, okay, I'll give you a plan for your utility bill. If you pick me, it'll be $10 a month. And in that contract, it'll say it's $10 a month for the first 2 months, and then on months 8 through 10, you're going to pay the retail market price, which means you just pay this astronomical price. And that's why, if you remember when there was that winter storm in Texas and all the people's power went off, and you remember some people's utility bills were coming out at $10,000, $15,000 because they had these plans that these utilities had gone to them and said, oh, sign the dotted line. And it says, oh, well, if there's ever a crisis, you have to pay the full market share. And so one of the things that we're going to look at is if we are going to allow you to choose. I've always said I will never vote for that unless we have consumer protections, because what I'm not going to do is what I've seen, where they come and they sign up the elderly, they sign up disaffected communities, and then they hold you hostage because there's something in the fine print that is in a 30-page contract that renews. I mean, they do the same things that we see all the telecommunications, where your cable bill will be $30. And then year 2 comes, and now they're saying it's going to be $199. You're like, wait, what happened? They say, oh, that was just for the 1 year. You signed a 3-year contract with the $30 was a 1-year plan. And so we're talking about that, because if we don't regulate them correctly and we let you have choice, we could find ourselves in a situation where you pay more because people are nickel and diming you everywhere. And so that's a gambit of what we do, our history, where we come from, what's going to happen. So now I'm going to stop talking and answer your questions, and we can just dialogue with each other for a little bit. Absolutely. So one thing I will tell you is the commission, Louisiana is Louisiana. So in New Orleans used to regulate their own utilities in the early 1900s. When we rewrote the Constitution, we allowed New Orleans to still regulate their utilities. So what we see is the City Council of New Orleans technically is the regulator of Entergy New Orleans. So a lot of people get this confused because it makes sense. So in this state, we have Entergy Louisiana, which serves everybody else in the state, and then we have Entergy New Orleans. And then Entergy's headquarters, because Entergy has 5 subsidiaries. There's Entergy Arkansas, Entergy Texas, Entergy Mississippi, Entergy Louisiana, and then Entergy New Orleans. Those are the 5 small companies. And then there's Papa Entergy that oversees all 5 of them, and they are also located in New Orleans. What does a virtual power plant mean, and why is this important? Oftentimes, when you think about power, right, you think about just building a big old generator, right? You drive down, you see them substations, you see all those big generators, you see a gas plant, you see a nuclear facility. But in this merging of technology now, you can build and create power in virtual ways. You could put rooftop solar on your house, and you can be producing power. And so what happens is, let's say we put rooftop solar on this church. This church could therefore produce more electricity than it needs. And so you may now be producing all of your electricity from solar, and then a virtual power plant says, now not only are you now consuming electricity, you are producing electricity. So you become a prosumer. So you're consuming and producing. And so then what we need is, then we don't have to build 50-year power plants that cost $500 million. Because investing in, let's say we put everybody in this little area, shopping center, put solar, we won't need them to build a power station right here. Because now what we got to do is build the lines, and then now the solar, you may not produce enough solar, but let's say the shopping center across the street may produce 2 times the amount of solar energy that they need, and so now they're sending their solar over here to this church, and so now we have created a system that is flexible. One of the things that's so much interesting now, these new electric vehicles are intense. I was in Houston at a smart house, and there's these new electric Ford trucks. The Ford Lightning is called. That car is so powerful on electricity that if you plug it in to your house, it produces enough electricity that it could generate a whole 4-bedroom home if it's charged up. And so that's what when we talk about virtual power plants, that's what we mean, is that the technology has allowed us to be able to make electricity in very different ways, and we should open the market. This is what the conservatives always say. I get confused up time because I'm normally called the woke liberal on the commission, but I'm the one saying open up the market. Let people compete. Let's do it all. Because at that point then your utility bill goes down, because this is what the trick is for the utilities. They get what's called debt equity, they get capital, and they get depreciation. And what does depreciation mean is, as let's say, you have a car, you buy a brand new car here, what does it do? It starts depreciating in value. So what a utility does is they get to make up in our rates that depreciation. So let's say if I tell them today they could build a 30-year gas power plant, and let's say now we're in year 10, and it has depreciated. And so I'm like, well, we should probably close that plant because it's not producing what. They get to recover the cost that it cost them to build it and the depreciation value of that plant. And so that's why you're seeing the move and the need for virtual power plants, is because there's not going to be a depreciation value on your rooftop solar. There's not going to be a depreciation value on that Ford Lightning truck that you're using to power your home. What they're going to be able to do is we're now going to be able to pool resources to say we don't need to build all these facilities that may or may not work. And so that's what we're really seeing. New Orleans is leading that. We're hopeful that we can do some of that here in Baton Rouge.
Yes, I do have a question about the energy efficiency program. Can you tell me a little bit more how that works, and is the program available for commercial buildings such as a church?
Yes, so the energy efficiency program, I'm gonna step back. So there's 2 programs that exist right now. So one, what I tell people is there is LAHEAP. LAHEAP is the Heating and Cooling Assistance Program, run by the Louisiana Housing Corporation, and there's community action centers. So if you ever have people who are struggling to pay their bills, there is money set aside available for them with LAHEAP dollars to do so. LAHEAP, LAIHEAP, and you can look up that at the Louisiana Housing Corporation. So they have funds available. So if anybody ever says I'm struggling, they can apply, get funds from there. Secondly, they also have weatherization dollars, because we know, as we were talking earlier, that some of the reasons people's bills are unaffordable is because their home's not weatherized right. They may have a broken window or a door that's not sealed correctly anymore, so all their air or their heat is flowing out. So there's also money set aside for that, because we know that's the one way to keep your bill lower is I tell people, think about it this way. Think about how high your bill would be if you had to open your refrigerator to cool your whole house. It would cost you $1 million probably. And so that's the way we think about weatherization, is we have to find where those cracks are, where the insulation is missing, because every time that's missing, you are using more energy to try to keep your house cool. So yeah, your house may be on 72, so you don't think you're spending as much money, but because all of your windows aren't sealed correctly, what you're doing to get to 72 may take you 3 times the energy that you really need to get to 72 if all your windows were closed. So the commission in 26 will start an energy efficiency program that I said is statewide. It will include commercial. It will include residential. We are building the program. We just hired Aptum to run this program for us. And over the next year, we will be building out those programs, what they will be. So it's not online yet. We do have portions that are online that is around public buildings. So you may have just seen my office just gave $1.4 million to schools here in East Baton Rouge. We gave about $600,000 to Glen Oaks High School, about $400,000 to Baton Rouge Magnet, another $500,000 to the community center to make sure that we can invest in some of those energy efficiency tools. And some of those are, like I said, it's your HVAC, it's your heat, it's your cooling system, making them more efficient. Sometimes that investment in those heat pumps, right? A lot of times we're not looking, those water coolers, those water heaters, they eat up a lot of energy. So finding the ones that are more efficient. And so we are also working, and we've been talking about this, and Akeem has been looking into this, about we are pushing getting solar and working with the solar developers to utilize houses of worship as a place, because these are commercial buildings that could desperately use them, reduce your energy bills, but also make you community partners. And we've seen this with Together Louisiana and Together Baton Rouge with the community lighthouse programs, where we're investing in solar to not only help the church, but then to help in times of trouble. So we saw this during Hurricane Francine. About 10 lighthouses in New Orleans went up, where churches were now places where people could come and cool off and charge their phones and charge their computers and have and benefit, because what we did is we said, well, if the power goes out, this can automatically produce it. And that solar, people forget, operates just like a generator. You put a battery, we can get a battery storage. The costs are coming down. So what we're really trying to do, and what I'm trying to do, is work with these solar developers to find a cost-friendly program. Because one of the challenges is, we know the issue with solar is it's just hard to put. It's that installation cost, right? It's going to cost you $12,000 to try to put it in, and not everybody has that disposable $12,000. And so what we're going to try to do is, how can we have them upfront this so we can do that and then move forward. So once we get that program underway, we are going to be big. Cedric has been leading in my office a lot of that work already. Like I said, we are now in the phases of building out this program, and we'll build it big and strong.
Just making sure.
Okay. So the homeowners, or people that live in their homes, is there a certain amount of cutoff as far as whether you would be eligible to get any of these services, or how would that work?
No, so right now I should tell you that you can call, if you are an Entergy customer. Entergy has a program already. They don't publicize it enough. But if you have said, like, hey, I want to make sure that they can offer you a energy efficient audit, and it's for free, where they come, they send out a technician, they examine your house or your commercial building, and they will tell you, all righty, here's what we found. You don't have enough insulation in your ceiling. This window over here is, and then they give you estimates. They have funds to also help you to do that. What we are doing is we are taking that program away from them and saying, well, we want to make sure you're doing it right, so we're going to run it, and we're going to manage it, and we're going to operate it. We don't have any cutoffs. What I did, though, to make sure that we protected people, is when we passed this rule, I had an amendment. And my amendment was that 15% of all the spending that we do on this program must go to low-income families in the state of Louisiana. Because what I was fearful of is that, just like everything, these savings will go to the richest people, because they would be the ones to know about it. They're the ones who have the information to know that, hey, if I get this Model ZX Whirlpool washer and dryer, it's going to save me $5,000 a year in my energy bill. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, you don't know that. You don't have the time to research that. So what I did is, even though we don't have an income eligibility, I said 15% of every dollar we spend in this energy efficiency program has to go to somebody that we classify as low income, which is 200% above the federal poverty line. What I also did is said, you know what, we have a real crisis here is we don't do enough for those people who are renting to know what energy savings they have, because since they are not the homeowner, since they are not the person that can come in and just say, okay, I want these windows redone, or I want some of those appliances come within the apartment or the house that they rent. I also had an amendment that put 10% of the funding aside for renters to say, I want to ensure that people who sometimes don't have a control, because you know some places it's up to your landlord what you can do to the house. And so we're going to work with landlords to be like, we're going to invest in lowering their energy bill, but the one thing you can't do to get this money, and we put it in the rule, is if I give you money to fix, let's say, the air conditioning at your rental property and you're renting, they're signing an agreement that if we give them that money, they cannot raise your rent. So they can't take the benefits of having their getting their rental property improved, right? Because if you get a new, let's say you're a place that puts all the appliances as a landlord, I'm not going to give you the benefit to say you're going to get all new appliances for free from a program because you were living in their home, and then they say, you know what, well, I figure out now I can make more money, so I'm going to kick you out, keep all my new appliances that they didn't apply for that you applied for. And so that's why I put that budget in there to say we're going to go and make sure that if you're renting, you also get to benefit from this program, but we're going to make sure that you're protected so your landlord doesn't get all the benefits that you technically earned and then that they get to reap. And so there are multitude of programs. Like I said, there will be some that are flowing from the federal government that will have some income basis, but what we're trying to do at the commission is do what I call categorical eligibility. And what that means is if you qualify, we don't need to create 15 applications. And I think that's the hardship that government does. We say, okay, if you want food stamps, you got to come apply here. If you need Medicaid, you got to come apply here. If you need heating and cooling assistance, come apply here. If you want this energy rebate, you got to come apply here. So what we're trying to do in the program is says, if you qualify for any program, 9 times out of 10 means you qualify for the other programs. So why not have it where if we have the verification is that if you prove that you're on Medicaid or WIC or SNAP or some other assistance, then we're just automatically going to qualify you for these energy efficiency dollars. Because why would I make you reapply to know what I already know? Because that's the hardest part, getting people the time commitment to do that. And so that's some of the work that we're going to build in that program. But I would say right now, your utility does have an energy efficiency program that they run. So for Entergy, if you're an Entergy Louisiana customer, it's called Entergy Solutions. You can call them and say, I want an audit done on my house or my commercial building. They can come and they'll look at it, and then they have funds available to then help you do that free of charge.
And so if I have any questions that I'm not sure about, I can always call you to get the lowdown.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You can always call me, and I'll give you everything from A to Z.
So I don't want to take up all the questions, but I have another question.
Come on.
In the neighborhood that I live in, we always have issues with our utilities because they go out like that for no reason at all. I mean, the weather is good and, there are no wrecks or anything. So all of these lines that are on the poles and stuff, how do we know once they come to supposedly, get the system back going, that they actually doing what they should do to keep it going? They give us all kind of excuses, and how can we check to see if they're actually doing what they need to do to the best that they can do it to keep us with our lights on, because we paying whether we have the lights or not.
No, you're absolutely right. So one of the things that I just recently did is I passed open up proceeding to create a rule on how reliable their electric grid system is. And what I mean by that is you just said it right. So I'm not to get too technical, but I'm going to step back. So what we do is we have what's called their standards that we created for them. And their standard says if they follow these standards, they pay a fine. But one of the metrics that we use for their standards is what we call safety and SAIDI. I'm not going to explain all, but these are system-wide. So here's what they do, and here's why I think it's not worked out, and especially in black and brown communities. Because it's a system score, they can go and fix two maybe challenges that they may see in University Place or around Town Center, and they fix those, and then they say, okay, look, at Entergy Louisiana, we're doing better in Baton Rouge because their system score went up. So what I said and what I did 2 months ago, they said, wait a minute. No, that's not how we should do it. We should do it at the zip code level, at the census tract. I want to see, does your score go up over here in Melrose or in Glen Oaks? And then I'm going to judge you, and you're going to get fined for that. And so one of the things that we are looking at now at the commission is saying for every power outage that is a fair weather power outage, which we call fair weather days, which means the sun is shining, it wasn't a storm. I believe, and the Michigan Commission did this, and I'm pushing at the Louisiana Commission to do it, you get a credit for every day, for every time your power goes out when it was a fair weather. Michigan went even a little further, and I'm pushing, that says not only do you get a credit for every outage, you get a credit for every hour that you're out. Because what responsibility do they have to get it back on if they know that if I'm not investing in certain communities, because here's the challenge, that's why I started with that conversation about the system. If their fine is on the system base, I don't have to go in every community and try to make the system more reliable. Because I can pick 4 places that probably are the most affluent and white places, fix those, and then guess what? My system score stays high because it's an average. But if I'm being scored by every zip code in every census block, and I have a fine that I have to pay those people for reliability, that means now those investments that they only make in certain places now have to come everywhere, because I'm not going to want to pay you $34 every time the lights went out if I'm Entergy, and especially if I know that's a system that I haven't upgraded in 20 years because that pole is leaning and I haven't really invested, or what happens, which is true to be the fair. A lot of times, a lot of the power outages are related to incidents like a car wreck or something, but it's because they don't fix the full infrastructure. That car hits that breaker box, all right, we patch it up. And then it's like, well, okay, now it's short, it's a circuit, the circuit keeps shorting. But it's because I didn't really fix the problem after it happened. I just kind of patched it up and said, oh, well, because I don't have to worry about it. But if I know, if that car just flies right here off of Airline, hits that breaker box, and then the power goes out for 5 hours, so that I'm going to have to pay this church for 5 hours worth of power outages, and then it's going to happen again tomorrow because I still didn't fix it, I think that will change it. So I'm hopeful that my colleagues will join me in voting for that rule, but I think that's one of the places where we do it, and then once we do that, then you can see those scores. Because one of the places we have these scores right now where you can come and see how well it is. And I'll tell you why Louisiana is so fraught. When we looked at it, when you talked about the average disruption per customer per year in the country, the average person has 2 power outages for approximately about 30 minutes over the span of the year. And that's where almost all the states fall. Louisiana, on average, has 10 outages for 8 hours per customer per year. So when I say we are an outlier, sometimes when I'm making that graph, Louisiana's off my computer screen, because I can't even make enough variables to fit it on the screen to show you how far away we are from where the rest of the country is. And I think it's because we haven't had commissioners really looking at this, and I'm hopeful that we can do that.
Okay, and one other question with that. So we can call and complain about our outages constantly like that? You know, we having outages on a consistent basis.
I will tell you, this is why we need to know, because the commission, we make their rates by and take an evaluation their complaint tracking system. So I tell people, call our office so we can put it in the system. Because every year we run a report of outages, of complaints. We handle them, we work on them as the individual commissioners, And then I use that in my evaluation of when they ask for increases or they ask for other stuff. Because I'm going to match what I'm hearing and getting from the community to what they're proposing. And then I can say, well, if they say, hey, we got an issue in North Baton Rouge, we need to build this plant, and I realize that the plant they're building is in the part of North Baton Rouge that is not having significant outages, there's a mismatch. And so, yes, we take those into account. We work on them. We do answers. So if there are any questions or complaints, you call us.
Well, y'all might get tired of hearing from me then, but I'm going to definitely
No,
call you.
we don't. Miss Tori in our office, she don't get tired of talking to nobody. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Deborah Holly, and I stay on Mission Drive in front of Winburn Elementary. I have a two-part. The first one is the cars, the speed. They have kids in my neighborhood at school when they ain't at school. They playing. Excuse me, but these fools is on the street racing like it's a racetrack. And I don't know what would help or how it would help. So it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really, really ridiculous. And I remember about 3 years ago, before my husband passed, it was a Pacific car, was always up and down, up and down. So my husband asked the car, the driver, look, when you come here, kind of slow your pace down, you know, you got kids. So he did that. Now, my husband died 18 months ago. Now he know he's gone, so he done start speeding down like, oh, well. So that's ridiculous. And the school zone, they don't pay that no mind.
Mm-hmm.
They're not paying it any mind.
No, and I mean, I think, and one of the challenges that we face is how much that damages our infrastructure. And I don't think people talk about that enough. That is one of the challenges that we face with burying lines underground, is that type of situation. What we face is because those cars are hitting the poles, are coming too close in the right of way, are they're knocking those trees out which are falling on power lines. And so one of the things that I talk about is a variety of things. Also, what we have to do is think about land space. What people don't talk about, or why utility bills are higher, is we need green infrastructure. Green infrastructure helps lower your utility bills. And people say, well, why? Think about if you have all concrete and it gets hot or it gets cool. To warm that space up is sucking energy. So what we see is one of the reasons black and brown areas of the state have higher utility bills is because they have less green spaces. They have less places that are naturally cooling the environment. And so there's a great book by a Mississippian, Heather McGee Toomey, who writes When the Street Lights Come On. And it talks about how some of these small things in our communities don't know. That's why we say we have to build some of those public spaces that can reduce that. That's why sidewalks are so important. When people think about energy and utilities, they think they're divorced. But one of the reasons why we need less driving and more walkable places and more engagement is because that's also energy. It reduces our energy bills. Because when we just have when we have sidewalks that people can walk on, we have those green spaces, it changes the amount of infrastructure that is needed. And so that is a symptom. What you describe is how we don't let all of our policies connect with one another. Because BREC and the city's development, they're not thinking about, and not to be mean to them, it's just something we don't talk about, to say like making sure that in those school zones we create more walkable areas, we reduce the drivable traffic, not only as a safety issue, but it's also an energy issue. And how all these issues are interconnected when we work together instead of looking at them as silos. And I think that's what I've been trying to do as commissioner, say these are not independent issues. I tell people this, look at this example. When we invested in renewable energy in a school system in Arkansas had a budget deficit, talking about closing schools, decided to invest in solar, built up solar on all their schools, all their systems, looked into some electric buses. In 2 years, they went from a deficit to a $1.9 million surplus that then was able to give every teacher and every school worker a raise. Not because they raised taxes, not because they cut a school, they didn't cut a single position. They invested in infrastructure that helped save them. So when I talk about renewable energy and new in some of these investments, it's not just to be green and hippie and clean. It is economic value for our people, how much we were able to save because we did some of those investments like that. And then when we do those investments, guess what you do? You reduce crime. You reduce all of the other social factors because now we're living. When we add those sidewalks and we put in those speed zones and we have better trees, you're not going to speed. You know, look, think about it like if you're going up a hill. You ain't speeding up a hill because you know if you curve too much that rock, you're going to fall right off that rock. Planting those trees creates that same thing because you know, all right, if I let loose a little bit too much on that wheel because I'm texting and that tree's right there, it's going to tear up my car. And so all of those are policies that go together that also address the safety issue that we may not look about it because we're just saying, all right, let's just put a camera there. That's going to work, but it's going to be a temporary work. How can we change the behavior, not just stop the behavior?
Okay, my part two question. I think this happened about 3 years ago. It's on. About 3 years ago, Energy was talking about they had overcharged customers, and they was talking about a rebate. What happened to that?
Yes, so we just approved that rebate. So what we did is the commission sued Entergy for running a plant that was not economical. And so one of the things that we do is we say, okay, Entergy just can't say, okay, I'm going to go build this plant and run it and charge you $50, especially if they can build a plant and run it at $20. And so we evaluate and we look and say, wait a minute. Why were you had something that was the cheaper cost and you chose not to use it? What we did is we sued Entergy. Entergy lost, but then they argued that the judge said they didn't have to pay anything, which didn't make any sense to us.
So how could they lose?
And one of the challenges is here's the game that they play. Because we are this entity, what they'll do is they'll charge, and they know at a certain point the commission's legal fees are in your utility bills. So what they do is they got big time lawyers. They go now we're paying somebody $250. Don knows this. Don's a lawyer. She wants to be the big corporate lawyer. They're gonna charge $250 an hour. And so what Entergy does is says, okay, well, you can keep litigating me, but it's just gonna keep costing your customers money because right now the federal government, look at this. If a commission, the utility regulator, sues a utility, the federal government lets the utilities law bills go in your bills. So I'm here, you elect me to protect you from the utility, and if I say the utility's doing something wrong and I sue the utility, them fighting me, you pay. And so we've been asking the federal government, we've been asking FERC, which is the federal regulators, to prohibit that. Or at least if you're not going to prohibit it, put a cap so that Entergy can't go hire the most expensive lawyer who's now running up the bill so then they can come to me and say, well, okay, Commissioner, you keep fighting, it's going to take us another 2 years, and that means everybody's going to have a $3 increase on their bill. So you will have to take the settlement that I offered you even though it's not what the people deserve. So we fought. What we ended up doing is we came to a settlement just a few months ago. Entergy had asked for a $450 million rate increase. We negotiated hard, and I said, we're not doing that. And so what we did is we settled. We settled at the rate increase. We got it down to $150 million. It's not great, but it's better than what they asked. And we settled these lawsuits. And so what did we do with that settlement money? You're going to start to see credits on your bills. So what we did is we have now convinced Entergy to eliminate a disconnection and reconnection fee. So no longer if you get disconnected, you will be charged to turn it back on because everybody has smart meters. Entergy had some of the highest late fees in the nation. We have reduced their late fee now for late payments from 5% to 1.5%. It's a percentage. And that was a struggle, but we got them down to 1.5, which is drastically different because when we look at what they were charging people, I mean, people were paying $30, $40 in a late fee. And a late fee is nothing but a poor tax. They're not losing anything by 2 days. They just were making, and the crazy part is for you to know, they were building that into their budget. So when I had an amendment to propose zero late fees, they say, well, you're going to have to raise my rates by another $2 million. I said, well, how are you going to calculate people not paying when they haven't paid yet? I said, so you're telling me you are finding ways to make money off of people being poor because now you're saying I'm short revenue off of, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be late this week. You don't know if you're going to be late. So how can you calculate that already in the rates? What also we did is we shaved off some of that rate increase with those credits. So what happened is while that rebate may not directly come as a check to you, it is going to show up on your bills. So your bills will have a portion lower than what it should be because of that, and we've upfronted that. And then what we also did is rolled off a bunch of their fees. That also was part of the rate pack. So they are given a rebate, it's just showing up and it's going to look differently because it's sometimes hard just to do a check, but you will see that credit starting in, I think, January, if my memory serves me correctly. You will notice that your bill is going to drop about $20.
Because we already, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, isn't that like double taxation because we already paying taxes on everything that, we pay local taxes, we pay state taxes, we pay federal taxes. So, everything is tax. So isn't that like double taxation?
It is, and we've been fighting Entergy on this. What Entergy used to do, so their taxes, Entergy's taxes is part of our bills. That's a recoverable expense. Their corporate income taxes. Here's what Entergy's been doing that we sued them on. Entergy would claim this was their tax liability, put it in our rates. They would go, because corporations they claim all these credits. Not pass those credits down to the customer, because that means let's say I'm paying them for their 8% tax liability, but they paying no federal taxes, which means I shouldn't be paying any taxes. They're paying that portion of the bill. They would go claim this credit that they're not qualified for, pay no taxes, get audited by the IRS. IRS would come back and say, okay, wait a minute, no. You couldn't have got that tax credit. You collected this money, you need to refund it. But because that process takes 5 years, once they got that letter, you know what Entergy would do on year 6? File for the credit again and start the whole process over. So you never get it because now they came back, claimed it. It's a new tax year, so it has to be a new audit. And we know the audits take the IRS 4 years. And so then we go back in this cycle where they constantly do it. Another challenge that we've been fighting is what they'll do is they have, because I told you Entergy is a parent company. There's Entergy and then there's the 5 companies. Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Texas, and New Orleans. So what they'll do is, let's say Louisiana's tax liability is short. They won't file taxes under Louisiana. They'll file it under the parent to make us pay a higher rate, even though our portion should be lower, because they're trying to say, oh, well, the whole company's tax liability is short. Well, we're like, that's not fair. Louisiana's good. We paid our taxes, so we should. And so this has been something that, unfortunately, Commissioner Clyde Holloway, I don't know if y'all remember, who ran for governor a few years ago, started at the commission, and he passed away about 10 years ago. So I'm going to, in a few months, pick up this process to say, we are going to look at how we're taxing. I mean, this is one of the things I tell people we got to be very careful about the governor's tax special session. Is one of his proposals right now, you don't pay sales tax on your utility bill. The Constitution prohibits sales tax to be on your prescription drugs, a state sales tax. You may pay a local sales tax, but a state sales tax on prescription drugs, food, and residential utilities. One of the proposals that the governor has issued so he can cut corporate and personal income taxes is undoing that protection and putting a state sales tax on your prescription drugs, your food, and your home utilities. So when we hear about this in November, this is why I'm going to be talking about it a lot, is because now you think about it. We've talked about all those issues that make your bill go up and down, and now you're going to throw a sales tax that is just the state collecting money because you have to pay a utility bill, and you have to pay a utility bill to live. And taxes has been one of the biggest deceptions of the utility industry, is because we have to pay their taxes is part of their operation business model, so it's to be in their rates. But who's auditing, who's watching to say, okay, yes, by paper, your tax rate should be this percent, but we all know how rich people operate. They get a tax credit for their dog Fifi. They get a tax credit because they open their eyes. So how do we make sure that flows? So in your utility bill, you are getting that credit as well, because I'm paying your taxes. So if you get a savings, I should also get that savings. Yes, sir. Yes, Pastor.
Increasing nuclear power in the state of Louisiana.
Yes, we have a nuclear framework right now that we are looking at. It's the Commissioner Scrimetta, my colleague, is very big on nuclear. We are looking at it. I will say nuclear is interesting because nuclear is very expensive to build. I feel so the people, my friends in Georgia Power built a nuclear facility. It went 40 times over the price. 40 times. And so one of the challenges with nuclear is, how do you build it cost effectively? How do you maintain it cost effectively? And what do you do with that waste? I mean, y'all may remember the big challenges we had in Nevada with Yucca Mountain, where the toxins, what do you do when the nuclear is no longer useful? And cleaning that. But we are evaluating, but there's movement, right? We're calling small nuclear reactors. These are smaller, kind of almost like solar panel nuclear that's developing. They're probably still about 10 years from truly being online, but that's something that's being looked at as an option of diversification, because we know, as I've said before, you can't rely on natural gas. And what I mean by that is natural gas is volatile, but it's also we're running into problems. When you think about the winter storm in Texas, Winter Storm Uri, no one really talks about the real issue why everybody's power went out. Their power went out because Texas only used a lot of natural gas and is not interconnected to anybody else in the country, that the generators couldn't come on because the gas pipelines froze. So the gas couldn't flow to the generator. And so because the gas couldn't flow to the generator couldn't come on. Because the generator couldn't come on, power couldn't come on. And so that's why I caution a lot of people that say, when they're like, we're a natural gas state, it's not to say that there shouldn't be some. But the problem is, when you are not talking about how our climate has changed and how we have gone from a hurricane. Let's think about Hurricane Francine. It developed on Sunday and was a Category 2 and hit landfall by Tuesday night. Unheard of. We had a week's notice of Hurricane Katrina, a week's notice of Hurricane Ida. Hurricane Milton, remember, it went from a tropical depression to a Category 4 in 36 hours. And so that type of system, are these winter storms, right? Or this Arctic blast where you just wake up the next day and the whole city's ice. That's going to be why nuclear is going to be important, because we're going to need resources that are not susceptible to the weather condition, which sadly natural gas is. Now everybody says, well, that's solar. Well, that's true. But guess what? You can do batteries. And we're developing that, because like right now it's a sunny day. Tomorrow it may rain. But if I have a battery on that solar panel, that means I've stored all that extra energy that I produced that I didn't use yesterday for today.
Yeah. Okay. I have two other questions. One I'll hold toward the end. The Green New Deal that was signed by Washington several years ago, does the Public Service Commission work with it relative to reducing greenhouse gases and that kind of thing?
One of the things that I think people don't know is the commission has probably the most important role in reducing pollution and greenhouse gas emissions in this state. So here's what I'll tell you. When you think about all the energy used in this state, from everybody's house, everybody's commercial building, all the big industrial plants, 70% of all the energy that is used in this state comes from those giant industrial facilities. 70% of all the energy used in this state comes from those large industrial users like Exxon and Shell and Marathon, Air Liquide, all of them. They make up 70% of it. But here's the challenge. This is why we talk about energy efficiency, and I'm going to get back to your question. So that means us as residents, we make up only 30% of all the energy used in this state. However, we have the highest energy compensation rate in the nation. So now while we are 30% of the energy portfolio, we are, as people, consume more energy in this state than the other states. And so that's a mismatch, right? That doesn't make sense. How am I a third of all the energy produced, but compared to all the other states, our houses are energy consumers, and that's because of all the stuff we talked about energy efficiency before. So what was great is that the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the IRA, the CHIPS and Science Act created a bunch of programs that are flowing down into Louisiana. Flowing down with the electric vehicle tax credit, right? That says if you want to buy an electric vehicle, the federal government gives you $7,500 to do so. We talked about those appliances coming on board in 2025. I'm working to make sure the governor applies. Will be a rebate program that says to get it, if you buy an Energy Star appliance, the federal government will cover 90% of the cost. When it comes to, as you see, President Biden has been very committed to changing this. And one of the reasons why I talk about this and go back to that industrial point is because here's what I tell people. If we don't utilize this funding, this is what's going to happen. We talk about reducing emission. Everybody's talking about reducing emission. Well, if we electrify everything, that means you need more power, right? Because that's more things to be plugged in, more things that got to turn on. If I'm not paying attention and I don't hold the utilities accountable to partner with the federal government as a commissioner, guess what's going to happen? The utility is going to say, hey, look, pastor bought everybody in his congregation an electric vehicle and they put a charging station here, so they're going to need more power. So I'm going to build them another power plant. But if I'm not on them, you know what power plant they're going to build? A natural gas power plant that's going to reduce the same amount of emissions that you just saved because it's easy to build, they make more money off of it, and it's cheaper. So that's why commissions are looking, and that's why we're working, is because if we only focus on getting rid of all the pollution over here, the utility is just going to build all the pollution back over here because we're not thinking about the power side. We're thinking about, all right, we want Exxon to not be polluting as much. So we want you to use renewable energy. So when we drive down Scenic Highway and Harding Boulevard, we're not full of smoke. So Exxon is going to be required to do that, but then Entergy is going to tell Exxon, well, you know what? To make sure that all your lights stay on and your chemicals work, I'm going to have to build this gas power plant that's going to reduce the same amount of pollution we just stopped Exxon from doing. And so that's why we got to look at nuclear and solar to say, no. Are those virtual power plants that Chico talked about to say, we're going to meet that need to ensure we don't have all that toxin and pollution as well.
One other question. Do you find that these companies are willing partners to work with the Green New Deal? I mean, does everything with these guys come down to money? I
will tell you, and this may surprise you, I've had more conversations about bringing renewable energy to Louisiana with, we love General Honore, Ms. Sharon Levine and Rise St. James, all the environmental actors, but I will tell you, you put all those conversations I've had with them, and the person that I've had more conversations with about renewable energy in this country has been Shell. Shell. And why? And that's surprising because they need it. Their European investors say you got to clean up your act. Their sustainability goal. And so when I say it's good, yes, here's who doesn't like the conversation about renewable energy as much. The utility, because they don't make money. I told you, once you build a solar facility, it's over. Those costs are done in the first 2-3 years. You don't get a depreciation value. So if I'm a utility, I don't want to build solar because I want to build that gas power plant because that gas power plant is going to make me money. Because it's going to be debt, it's going to be equity, it's going to be capital, it's going to be depreciation. I'm not getting all that on a solar farm. I'm not getting that on a wind farm. I'm not getting on the nuclear farm. So we actually have a real fight that most people don't know. The big industry wants the renewable energy, and the utilities like, I'll think about it. I'll give you this. I'll give you that. Because what the utility does is they want to ensure that they make the money. So one of the things we just did at the commission says, you know what? No, you don't only have to be the ones to build. So if Shell decides they want renewable energy and they want to build a solar farm and they want to pay for it at their own expense, we are going to let them do that, and then we'll debate whether or not we let them sell that energy back. But here's why they don't want to do it, because let's go back to that 70-30. Every time they build a power plant, for Shell, it's not divided 70-30. It's divided 100%. So that's why they don't want Shell or Exxon or Marathon to be building power plants themselves, because they don't get to profit off of it. Because if they say, oh, Shell, you need another power station, I'll build it, and guess who pays for it? Everybody in this room. And so that's the fight right now, is getting the utility to build it and to do it, because the utility doesn't have an advantage to doing it, because their model is how much money do I make for my shareholders, not what's best for our environment, what's best for our planet, what's best for our people.
I have a quick question, Commissioner. I actually watch the Public Service Commission meetings. How often are they held, and can the public come down and get involved?
Absolutely. So we meet once a month. We typically take 1 month off, so we normally have 11 meetings a month. So the 1 month right now is the month of July, is our summer recess. They're typically the second or third Wednesday of the month. They're normally at 9 o'clock in the morning in the Galvez building, downtown Baton Rouge. However, we do move our meetings around the state to give other communities the opportunity to participate. So just last month we were in Buras, Louisiana, way down there in Plaquemine Parish. We are probably in December going to be in Natchitoches. But even if you cannot physically attend, our meetings are publicly live streamed on the LPSC YouTube channel. They are also archived, so if you miss a meeting, you come in a little late, you can rewind it, you can fast forward it. And then because we are like a court, then if you just like to read, then you can just read the transcript. Because we have a court reporter who's transcribing every word that we say. So those are all the ways that you can get involved with the commission in what we do, and then make your voice heard. And then people can come and testify and say, hey, wait a minute. I want to talk about why we haven't buried lines underground. I want to know what you're doing on the Green New Deal. I want to know what's being done to ensure that communities aren't losing power every day. I want to know what you're doing in community investments and these rebates. And so and that process is open. You just come and you just talk. You don't have to, and nothing else to it.
My second question is, I guess, part two. I only see two commissioners that really do some fighting, and that's you and the other guy. I won't call his name, but why is it everybody else sit back and just look like they're just gonna go along with the program?
Well, I think it's because, like I said earlier, the commission's been quiet. There's not been a political appetite, right? I mean, we see today, if people knew the power, and that's what I stress, then that's why I'm so active. We have so much power as public service commissioners. I can today, by a vote, tell Entergy, you can't charge a late fee. You can't I have the power to tell them right now, you can't disconnect somebody, because I believe a utility is a human right. And so when you have that power like that, utilities and special interests don't want you to know. And especially, as I mentioned earlier, for those who weren't here, Louisiana is only one of 10 states that actually you get to elect your commissioners. The other states, they are appointed by the governor, which means they have to go through the political process. You have a direct say in who gets to manage and run the utility in your state. And so because we have so, and then here's a quick tidbit for you that I don't think you know. Louisiana, as you say, nobody knows about the Public Service Commission. We are the only commission in the country where all of our power is granted to us from the people in the Constitution, which means, and what I mean by that is the governor can't interfere in our work. The legislature can't interfere in our work like they do in the states and cities. So much so, even the courts can't. There are multiple cases where the Supreme Court of Louisiana has told somebody, I think the commission is dead wrong. But the Constitution says they have the power and they are independent, so I have to give it to them. So when you have all that power, to finish answering your question, Chico, when you have all that power, people do everything in their power to ensure you don't know that that power exists. Because if people knew that we had so much power to enact change without interference, could you imagine what the utilities would have to deal with? So they are very good at electing people and spending money to ensure a friend, and maybe not, I won't even say a friend, a quiet mouse gets to the commission so no one knows where the cookies are.
I'm really concerned. I understand about the energy. That's I understand that. But my really concern is, to me, I didn't get the answer about the speeding. My thing is school zones. And I know the cross guard can only do so much. Up and down Windburn, I think this young lady, I met her at the barber shop, and the guy was telling her, during school time, they are not at all paying them kids any mind at all. Now, I used to see a police out there every blue moon, but it's ridiculous. Something needs to be done about that. Really, it needs to do.
Yes, ma'am, and I'm gonna talk to the city council. Unfortunately, that's out of my purview. I only regulate the utility side, but that is something that we need to make the Metro Council aware of. The Metro Council and Councilman Hurst, who represents it there, they got to step up, and we call on them and tell them, leaders, that they have to step up with how are they handling speeding and handling those issues. And then that's also at the city's Department of Public Works and what they're doing. Maybe they need to add stronger speed bumps, especially in school zones. That's been a big conversation now, that every school zone and every adjacent street around a school zone should have multiple speed bumps to help slow that traffic down and slow that speeding down. But I think it's an issue that we need to talk with the school board and the city council about improving.
One more question before I get to Ms. Rose. Being a former incarcerated person, the phone rates for family members that have loved ones on the inside, why does it cost $15 to make a phone call to East Baton Rouge Parish jail? Who regulates those funds? Where are those funds coming from?
Absolutely. So one of the things that the commission has is the power to regulate these phone call rates below the Federal Communication Commission's rates. And so, as Chico just pointed out, for a while, the FCC was trying to regulate interstate calls. So interstate calls meaning calling within the state. They have the power to regulate interstate calls, so a call that's going from, let's say, somebody's here incarcerated in Louisiana and they're calling somebody in Georgia. The FCC has the power to say, okay, wait, you can make that right here. But they didn't have, and they had fought for the power to be able to say, if you're calling from Lake Charles to Monroe, that they could regulate that. In a bipartisan, unanimous vote a year ago, Congress and President Biden signed the Martha Wright Reed Justice and Accountability Act that gives the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, the authority to regulate, and for my friends who come from the legislature, the bill says they shall, not may, they shall regulate inter and intra-state phone calls. They just released their proposed rule a few months ago, about maybe 2 months ago, and Cedric and my office has been working a lot on this, that has cut those rates in half, capped them. They're also looking at creating and ensuring there's a fair rate because, as we know, technology has changed. You're not using a pay line anymore. You can use a cell phone, you can Zoom, FaceTime, Skype, whatever you want to do. So the FCC now is working on a rate to ensure that people aren't held captive to say, okay, well, you know what, nobody's using landlines anymore, so now I'm going to charge you $12 for 10 minutes on FaceTime. You know there's no cost to that. And so the commission is thankful that they've done this, right, that they've lowered these rates, but what we're looking at is making them free. That's my ultimate goal. I've been talking with my colleagues in Massachusetts, my colleagues in Illinois, who have found a way to say all phone calls are free. One of the challenges that we have in Louisiana, though, is we don't see the budgets of sheriffs and jail operators to see if there's any kickbacks, but we regulate those contracts. And so Commissioner Campbell and myself have been working on this. So I believe in our November meeting, we have sent a letter to all of the operators to say, we want you to come tell us what your rates are now and what are you doing with those rates. So we can better analyze how we do it, because if we know, because one of the things is we always hear is like, oh, well, we can't do it because it's going to cost the sheriff budget money. But we know sometimes these companies are giving the services with the kickback. So they're not losing any money by doing that. And so we're going to look into that, but we have the power to regulate. I think the big challenge for us is going to be whether or not we have the power to regulate video calls, which is the new thing because that's such a telecommunication issue. And like, we didn't get into it today, but the reason why your cell service and your internet sometimes is waffly and you don't know what you're doing is because right now nobody regulates them. The state legislature has not given the commission the authority to regulate internet and cell phone companies. We have the authority, and we used to regulate landline. So we had Bell back in the day. How many of y'all remember Bell South? Bell South, we regulated. But as it's transitioned, the regulation and the authority didn't transition. And so now that's why when you think about why AT&T may get on your nerves and AT&T seems like they can do whatever they want is because they live in a vortex. They're only regulated at the federal level because the state has never decided to regulate that. And that's where I think the big challenge is going to be is if we're not looking at these contracts to make sure that people don't say, okay, we're going to get rid of all our landlines, put in a bunch of cell phones, and then guess what? Because they're using cell phones, now there's no regulation because I can't regulate a cell phone rate. Ms. Rose, I think you had a question.
Oh, yeah, couple of questions, but I wanted to know, you said that y'all meet once a month, but it's not in Baton Rouge all the time.
The vast majority, we probably only move maybe 4 or 3 times a year.
Okay.
But we're always mostly in Baton Rouge.
So you have it on your website?
Yes, ma'am. If you go on the Louisiana Public Service Commission website, we list all the dates. You're only probably going to see 2 more meetings because we typically do it for the year. So we're probably about to make our 2025 schedule, and that will probably come out maybe in our November meeting. So I think maybe in a few weeks we'll put out the schedule for next year. They're tentative, but they kind of come in and out, but we haven't made that schedule yet. But they're always here.
Okay, and you said that we could watch it if we don't go in person. That would be on the website as well?
Yes, ma'am. On the website, there's a link, but also if you just go to YouTube and put in LPSC, we have a YouTube channel where, like I said, all of the previous meetings are there. You can watch the meeting live. And because it's on YouTube, it's easy. If you decide you take a phone call and you click pause, you'll come right back and you can click play. If you didn't hear something correctly and you want to rewind or fast forward, you have the right to do that as well. That's why we put it there.
Okay, that's FL what?
LAPSC. And the Home Channel Network also records all of our meetings as well. So if you go to Louisiana Home Network, all of our meetings are recorded by them and sent so you can get a DVD or a video or a web link from them as well. So there's multiple places.
Okay, and I just wanted to make one other comment about the lady that was talking about the speed and whatnot on your street in your area. I have that same issue, and what I've done is I've called. It depends on where you live. If it's the sheriff's department or the city parish, you can call the traffic division, and you can complain about the speed on your street if you haven't done that, and request that they send out somebody from the traffic division to do like a speed check, and they'll do that. But you have to constantly call them, because I do that all the time, and my street is terrible. I've been trying to get them to do speed bumps, and I've mentioned that once with Councilman Hurst, and I'm going to go talk to him about it, because it's ridiculous, and you're absolutely right. No police come in our neighborhoods, to monitor anything unless there's some kind of crime going on. So you just have to get on that phone and just constantly call them, and they will come out eventually. But if you never call them, they're not going to come. Yes, ma'am, I do have it in my phone. I'll give it to you. Okay. You're welcome.
That next session is on November the 20th at the Galvez room.
And the public can come out November the 20th and ask
November
all
the
these
20th.
questions.
And look, I will tell you, I want the public to come. I will tell you what I did my first meeting, because I was very, the public participation is there. The day after my first Public Service Commission meeting, I gave my introduction, and I said, I want you to raise your hand if you are not a regulated utility, a lawyer for a regulated utility, or a lobbyist for a regulated utility in that crowd. And I saw one hand. One hand. And I said, and so I remind my colleagues that when we are doing the work, we gotta have a strategy. I'm not doing the work for the people in that room, because right now that room doesn't represent the people. So I said we can't get caught up in just who's sitting in the crowd, because everybody that's sitting in this crowd right now is billing somebody to be here. Somebody's getting a paycheck. Even I'm getting a paycheck to be there. I said, so that means we can't really be doing the public's work if we don't include the public. And so that's why I've been trying my hardest to get public involvement. If you look, we push out the agenda so you know what's on the agenda, because it's hard to find sometimes, and it's hard to understand what we're doing. And so we've been very big on that, but that's, our meetings are open. I advise you, if you want to, come sit, talk to the commissioners, make comments, and just engage. Yes, Pastor.
How can a church partner with your office to help you fulfill your mission? You seem to be on a different track than the others. So how can we help?
Well, yeah, no. So this, I guess we didn't make a section. This little section over here is portions of my staff, and so we do whatever. So if there's a community event that you believe we should be at, just information. We have tables. We have compiled all of the assistance programs that utilities offer, because like one of the things is we require them to offer assistance programs. But the thing is, it's very hard to offer when you don't want to tell people. So a lot of times there are assistance programs buried on their website, or you got to know, and the call centers don't know all the information. So to partner with us is we are accessible. We bring people to us, and we go to people. Like I said, we have partnered with members at their school drives or at their community events. We've gone here, we've gone there. And so anything that may come to mind, we have a team. Hakima and Marshall lead our engagement team, that their entire premise is just to think about that and work on that. Cedric leads our policy team, so if there's policy questions, he'll come in. And so we have we are open. We are trying to find ways. We want people to know this information. Like I said, we talked about it. How many people, you remember, I'll tell a story. Remember when cell phones first came out, right? That they were like, if you call somebody after 8 o'clock, this is what you pay. If you call long distance, this is what you pay. When text messages came out, I remember my mama used to fuss at me. After 100 text messages, That one-on-one text message, every letter is 10 cents, right? And so we were able to manage our cell phone bills because we knew what everything is. And so one of the things I want to do is give that information to people to say, hey, if you use electricity at 5 o'clock, it's going to cost you a lot more. So I tell people, wash your dishes at 7, because that's when the peak load goes off. So, or run your dishwasher at 7 instead of 5 when you get home from work. And it's sometimes it's things like that that are small that will make the significant difference in how much your bill is. But the utility doesn't tell you that because they want you to use your stuff at the highest mark, because if they use it at the highest mark, that's the more money they make. So that utility's not going to come out there and tell you, hey, you know, if you wash your car at 1:30, it's only going to cost you 10 cents. And so what we want to do is we want to empower people to be better energy users, to know why it's important to get a smart meter, why it's important to maybe get that smart thermostat, right? Because that means then you can say, okay, let me turn down the house while I'm gone. But then if I have a smart thermostat, like, I can turn it down during the day because I'm not home, save some energy costs. But if I know I'm leaving work at 5 o'clock, 4:30, crank it up. So now by the time I got home, it's cool. So I saved money. But you know, without a smart thermostat, it's either got to be 78 when you leave or 68. But if we tell people and show them the power of why that smart thermostat is important, that means, well, if I'm gone, I'm going to turn it up so I'm paying low. But I can now sit at my desk or sit in the car on the way home, turn the AC back down or turn the heat back up in the winter. And now my house is to the temperature I needed when I'm there, but I didn't waste all that energy when I didn't. And see, like, that's some of the smart things that we're seeing that businesses are doing. Like, I went to Amazon in DC, their new plan. You want to know what they did? Amazon, it was interesting. They had all of their lights and their vents that hung lower. And I was like, I asked the question, I said, well, why did y'all do that? And they said, oh, well, so we don't have to cool the whole room. They said, why would I put the vent way up there if everybody's only 7 feet tall? Some of the challenges in building codes, we're putting that. From up there. So those are just some of the ways that we're trying to showcase to people is what you can do. How not taking away that we got to hold the utility accountable, but it's the things they don't tell you that you can do to lower your bill, that you control, because you can control your thermostat. One of the things I unplug some of that stuff, because I don't know if people know, everything that's plugged is still using energy, because it has to have the energy to use once you turn that switch on. So sometimes it does make sense, like if you know you only drink coffee once a week, unplug your Keurig, because there's something in the circuit, it's going to keep using energy to do so. I know most people don't know that. Yes, sir. Yes, Pastor. Absolutely, we can definitely put that together, and we'll put not only the ones that we have at the commission, but the partners that we have. A lot of people don't know about the affordability program for internet, right? There's a program that all internet providers were to do, to say we will give you high-speed internet at $30 if you qualify. There are programs, like I said, for energy efficiency. If you're saying my bill is too high, the utility, you call them, they have to send someone free of charge to assess your house. You got dollars for heating and cooling assistance. So if you're struggling paying your bill, you can apply for LAHEAP dollars at the Community Action Center. So we'll put together all those resources so people can know here's where you can and go to get assistance. And then also know to call our office. If you have, we handle this all the time. We work with the utility. So I will say, like, look, Ms. Rose, this is a hard month for her, and this bill is high, and you send a disconnection notice. Can you give her some time? Or we've created plans and one of the things that I'm working on in the rate making is changing it. I understand that the utilities, they have to make money. But what I say is we got to do it in a flexible way. So one of the policies that I'm pushing is a pay-as-you-go. That instead says, because, sometimes you can pay your bill, and then, there's that one spike month where it creeps up that may be hard. And then now you're struggling, do I pay rent? Do I pay for the kids to go on the field trip or whatnot. So what I'm trying to been proposing is a pay-as-you-go that says, okay, if that month or two spikes, as long as you pay something, you stay afloat, and then as long as you have completed paying that by the end of the year, full calendar year. Because I mean, like if my bill's $100 each month and I got it, and then I get that 1 month where it's $250, let me pay $100, and then next month I may pay $110, and I may pay $120, or my income taxes come, so I get a little bit of money, and so then I'm not in this ever constant every month struggle of, all right, now I got to find $200 extra. So I'm talking to the utilities like, let's do it where you pay as you go, and as long as you get to the end year cycle and you are in the green, you're good. Because that gives people the flexibility, because we know our cash flows differently, and that's what I always take offense when some of my rich colleagues say, well, my daddy always taught me, when you make $1, save 50 cents. And I say, well, what happened? How can you save 50 cents for every dollar if every dollar you make, you need $3 to pay your bills? So we can't think about it that way. Because if you don't have the capital to save that 50 cents because my dollar, I'm already $2 short of what I need to pay the bills, that mentality of save 50 cents doesn't really work. And so that's the type of work we're trying to do to get more people engaged and involved. It's very important. We are a very close-knitted body. There's only 5 of us, and so it takes 3 votes to do anything. And the great thing about being 5 is it means everybody's important, because it's hard to get to 3 from 5. So that means people got to listen. But the bad thing about having 5, that means you don't have a margin of error. So if we don't have good people, if we get 3 people who don't care about helping communities, we're in bad shape. And so that's why Commissioner Green, who represents the other half of Baton Rouge, Lafayette, and the Bayou region, announced he was not running for re-election. So on the November ballot is District 2. District 2 has portions of mostly South Baton Rouge. But it's going to be important because, like I said, Commissioner Green and I have found a way to really work for the Capital Region together. There was an article just this morning about the importance of these PUC elections in a national publication, who talked about how Devontae Lewis, a progressive activist, and Craig Green, a former LSU football player, orthopedic surgeon, Republican, came together and created the first energy efficiency program in the South. So losing him is important because we were working. And so I think this race is very important. So if you hear people say, I don't know what this Public Service Commission is on my ballot, let them know I think it's one of the most important jobs because it touches everything you do in your life. And that's why people don't know about it. Because when we talk about the president, I love the president, please go vote so we can have a change and we don't go retreat. But here's what I tell people. I wake up and every decision I make is going to impact you today, right now, this very moment. Every decision the president makes is not going to impact you today, right now, in that very moment. And we got to get people to understand that some of these local offices are so important because literally we can make a difference. I use myself when you remember last year when it got extremely hot and it was just, the heat was unbearable. I sent a letter to the utilities and I said, please I'm begging you, do not disconnect people in this summer heat. And we stopped it. That's the impact that this commission can have, is because that one letter we did probably saved a bunch of people from having to sit in a blistering hot house because they could not afford to keep their lights on because it was so hot and the bills were so high. If someone joins to do the work that Foster and I do together, we're 3. And what was the magic number? I said we need to do everything? 3. We right there. We are right there to have truly impactful changes in the way Entergy and energy works if we get a third person who just commits themselves to the same level of work and commitment that Foster Campbell and I did. But because we're only two, and we know we've been having, and Dr. Green, as I told you, has been with us sometimes and not all the time, if we get somebody that ain't good, guess what we got? We got three in the opposite direction. That means it's going to be a lot harder for us to keep this statewide energy efficiency program, to put those fines on those outages. And so that's why I say this election is important for various reasons, because Craig kind of went back and forth between these camps of twos. And when three is the magic number, that one person now is either he's going to make it or break it. So I tell everybody, please pay attention to these three candidates running in District 2 to see who you think will join the pro-people side of the commission.
Thank you for what you do, and this organization vote we put this on, and we've endorsed the candidate of the Public Service Commission already.
And I've endorsed him as well.
We've already endorsed because the guy that's running against the guy that's the senator, he hasn't really completed his Senate job for the community, so now he wants to be on the Public Service Commission, so people need to understand.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say look at votes endorsed candidates, look at the Housing Alliance's scorecard that came out about who's going to protect voters. There's other information. I have also supported him. I think he would be our third vote. But like I said, we're going to have two more elections in 2 more years. The commission, we're every 2 years. We're a staggered term. So I'm not up until 28, but Commissioner Campbell's termed out. So we're going to have to, if you all your friends in Shreveport and Monroe and Alexandria, we're going to have to start thinking, because in 2 years we got to protect my comrade's seat, because he won't be able to run, but we need somebody who's going to fight just as hard as he did. So, well, I want to thank you all for coming out. This was great. I hope you got the information. Our doors are open. Anytime there's a question, call me, email. We put all of our information on the website. I'm the only commissioner where my email is on the website, so if I take a few days to respond, please charge it to my keyboard and not my heart, because that means there's just too many of the emails because I did that. We've also put a personal cell phone for me. I did this during the storm. I said, you don't need to text me, call me. And so, I wish one of my other staffers was here, Charlotte. This woman during Hurricane Francine took a risk and decided to text the number I said text. And she was telling me the story. She said her husband said, nobody's really paying attention to that. So I answered the text. I said, okay, what's your address, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then I knocked on the door, and she said, whoa, that was really you texting. I said, I told you, when I said text me, that wasn't an automated system. That wasn't a fake text. I said, here's the phone in my hand. You told me your problem. You gave me your address. I said, I'm coming, and here we are. And so when I mean that you can call, text, email, I mean it. I will show up if you need me, probably to my staff's advice, because they probably can never get to me because they never know where I am or what I'm doing, because I keep agreeing to so much. So I'm open. I'm here. Anything I can do. But thank you for coming out today. I hope I gave you some good information that you can take back somewhere else.